because one of my awakening experiences was in the middle of one of my craziness activities, right? I was arguing with my wife, right? And I have been practicing, meditation for years and years and years. So I kind of had an ability to wake up from time to time. And I was arguing with my wife, and in the middle of the argument, I woke up. And what that's like is like in the middle of the argument, I was identified with my point of view. You know, when you're arguing, you identify with your point of view. You are a point of view when you're arguing, right? So I'm identified with my point of view, and I'm gung-ho, and she's wrong, and she's doing this to me, and I'm not taking this anymore, and you know that routine. We all do it with one another from time to time, right? In the middle of all that, all of a sudden, it was like I was outside of myself watching me be that way. And that was a lesson. You know, if you're acting nuts and talking crazy to somebody you love, you know what I mean, and causing upset and causing pain and causing consequences for yourself and for that person, if you're in the middle of doing that, right, and somebody started filming you but you didn't know, and then later they showed that to you, you would say, give me that. Right? Because you would hate the suffering you would suffer watching you be that way. And if you could see that in the middle of when you were being that way, you would immediately stop. You would wake up. It would like, oh my God. It would almost be like you're having a nightmare and you woke up, and you say, oh, phew, I'm glad that was a nightmare. Well, unfortunately, it wasn't. That was actually you being crazy, right? So when that happened and I woke up, it was like, oh, it was like I was outside of my brain. I was outside of my mind, and I could then deal with the situation appropriately. All of a sudden, in the middle of all this craziness, I was able to turn to her and say, you know what? I take everything back. I take it all back. That was all just crazy. That was crazy. I'm sorry. Forget I said that. Let's just forget that and blah, blah, blah. And that's what any of you would do if you woke up in the middle of when you're being nuts, because it's obvious. It's obvious when you calm down and you look back, you were nuts. So that's just one way that being awake works, right? That's just one way to know that you're crazy when you're crazy, right? To know you're walking when you're walking. To know you're thinking when you're thinking. Most people don't know they're thinking when they're thinking. And what I mean by that is when I say know you're thinking when you're thinking, what I really mean is be aware of thinking happening, right? I say you're thinking because that's common parlance, right? But one of the things you learn through these teachings and practices is that you're not thinking. Thinking is happening. Thinking is happening. So you're a witness to thinking, but you're not the thinker of the thoughts. Yeah, so when you wake up, you realize, oh, that's different. That's different. For me to be aware of thoughts that are occurring in my mind that I'm not causing, that's a whole different view. Now, I don't have to feel crazy and ashamed and all that. No, I can start to pay attention to what's going on in this thought process. And when it's crazy, when it's off the mark, remember sin, off the mark? Yeah, when it's off the mark, I stop. I don't continue to do that. So by practicing this and continuing to maintain being awake more and more consistently, right? Your life begins to be an awake life. Your life is no longer like an accident happening. No, your life becomes intentional. You're awake now, and because you're awake and you begin to see how the machinery works, right? You can now have intentions. You can intend about the way you're going to be. You can intend about the future and how you're going to behave and what you're going to say and what you're going to do. You can have intentions. It's safe to have intentions because now that you see what's really going on, it's possible for you to follow up on those intentions and make them occur. So you have more power because you're awake. You have more power because you're in touch with reality. You're actually seeing what's occurring now instead of living in an interpretation of it. So being asleep, another way of talking about being asleep is that when you're asleep, you're in a thinking activity. You're up here. You're in this mind experiencing interpretations of reality. You're experiencing what this mind turns the data that comes in from the world into. And you didn't know you were doing that. You thought what you thought was real was real. You thought that a tree was a tree. You thought that the people in your life that you knew were the way you knew them. One of my favorite teachers calls that tranquilized familiarity. You know, that if you ask somebody, you know, do you know Bob? Oh, I know Bob. I know how Bob is. I can tell you all about Bob, right? That's tranquilized familiarity, you know, tranquilized obviousness, right? Yeah, that you think you know other people, you think you know yourself, but none of that's true. None of it's true. So when you wake up, you start assuming things about people. You start realizing that you don't know other people. All you ever know about other people is your interpretation of them. That's all you ever know. And I promise you, that's not them. That's not them. You can test this if you want. You can do it between people who have been married, right? I could ask him, tell me about your wife, right? And he'd tell me all about you, right? And if you've been together for a long time, some of it may be accurate. But I'll bet then if I ask you, well, tell me about yourself and tell me what wasn't accurate about him, there's definitely plenty of material there. Nobody, now, there's plenty of material there, but even your own interpretation of you isn't true. That's all made up. That's all made up. If you ask somebody tell me about yourself, they're not going to tell you, well, I'm a liar, I'm a thief, you know, you can't trust me. They never talk like that, right? The ego doesn't put itself down, right? It'll tell you good stuff. Oh, I'm very intelligent, I enjoy life, and you know, they paint a picture. They paint a pretty picture for you. And you paint pretty pictures about other people too, right? You know, that's one of the things that happens when you fall in love. When you fall in love, you see this image of the other person, right? Like a beautiful painting, and you're in love with it, right? And then after you're married and a year or a couple years go by, it's like, what the hell was I looking at? But that's the way it goes, right? Because what you were looking at is your distorted image of the other person. That's all. You know, you hadn't got what you wanted with them yet, so you were still seeing them in an idealistic way, right? Soon as you got what you wanted with them, then you weren't so idealistic about how they appeared anymore, and you started noticing their little quirks, the things about them that you wish you had noticed before you got married. Well, it's too late now, right? The thing about waking up, though, is that when you wake up, you realize that you have the absolute ability to have life work. This is really the heart of the matter, you know, that you discover that the reason your life hasn't been working is because you made a cardinal mistake that everybody makes. You thought that you were this body, you thought you were this personality, and through these teachings and practices you can come to understand that that's a mistake, that's not true, and then you can start to familiarize yourself with reality. Okay, so what is true? What is real? Well, in these teachings and practices, one of the things that is very important is not that you just believe what somebody tells you. That's how you got where you are now, okay? But instead of that, if I say something to you, I'm not telling you something that you should believe. I'm pointing to something that you could look at and see for yourself. And if you could see it for yourself, it's not coming from me. And if you see it for yourself and you're convinced because you saw it directly for yourself, right, then it's yours. It's not a belief anymore. And that's possible to do with yourself. You can recognize who you are in such a way that you can let go of the beliefs you had about who you are and start to function in reality. Start to function as what you actually are. Start to see the world as it actually is, not your interpretation of it. And once you're connected with reality and once you know who you are, you can begin to live a real life. That's a real life. The life you're living when you're thinking you're something you're not and you think the world is something it's not, that's not a real life. That's not a real life. That's why the word authenticity is used in these teachings and practices. An awake person is authentic. What does that mean? They're real. What does that mean? They're being themselves. They're being who they really are. That's authenticity. The word authentic means real, right? And in these teachings and practices, one of the things that comes to be clear is that most of humanity is not real. Most of humanity is inauthentic. They're being a made-up version of a personality that they believe is them. No wonder it's not satisfying. You see what I'm saying? No wonder it's not satisfying. It's like an actor playing a role in a play, right? And expecting to get from that person, the character they're playing in the play, expect them to get a life that works out of the character that they're playing in the play who has a script that they're playing. So there's not much wiggle room there. It's not very creative, right? And a life that is a typical life of a human being that's not awake is not creative. It's prescribed. It's a script you're living in. Your personality is a script, right? You can't act outside of that script. You know, what kind of person are you? Oh, I'm the kind of person that does X, Y, and Z. I'm the kind of person that's very afraid of these things. And you have to live inside of that script. That's your script, right? What you find out if you wake up is that none of that's true. None of it's true. All the things that you thought were true that you were afraid of have to be revisited, including death. All the things that you thought were real, that you were acting as if they were real, have to be revisited because a lot of it isn't, including who you think you are, including who you think other people are, including what you think reality is. So, there's so much involved in what these teachings are. That's why I was saying to you earlier, this is not about just stress reduction. This is about understanding the truth. This is about waking up to reality. And that's why people who study meditation and practice meditation are committed to that, because they understand what it can make possible. And they understand the condition that they're living in, that if they don't get out of that condition, it's not going to go well. It's not going to go well. Yeah, it's going to be a condition in which there's a lot of suffering, and as you get older and the body gets older and you get closer to the end of your life, the suffering will start to increase. And if you don't understand what's going on and you don't know how to deal with it, right, you will do what most human beings do, right? They numb out and they go south. All you have to do is go across the street here to Lima Estates and take a walk. You know, right? Take a walk in these senior centers, right, where people are vegetating, right? Health is a function of participation. So if you want to stay healthy when you get old, participate. Don't just go sit and stare at the ceiling like a lot of old people do. And they're doing that because that's their role. That's the script they're in. That's what society says you get to do when you get old. You get to be put in a warehouse. So we don't have to look at you. So we don't have to deal with you. So we don't have to be reminded of old age and death. Look, that's sick, isn't it? Right?
That's our culture. Something in the Eastern.
You know what? It is. You know what? It is. It is. Because you know what? The Eastern countries like India and China and Japan modeled themselves after the United States. So they became sick too. They caught the virus from us of stupidity and ignorance, right? And so now in India, their drug problem is worse than here.
It is?
Yes. Oh yeah. Because there's a lot more drugs and a lot easier access to them, right? So, and same thing in Japan. Look at Tokyo. Tokyo is more technological than New York City, right? And the kids, look at the kids in China and Japan and India. Yeah, they got piercing. Everything's pierced. You know, rings in the nose. Everything's pierced tongue, tattoos. Looks just like America. The older people in Japan and China and India still know about their traditions. You know, Jay. Any of you remember Jay? He used to come to the class, right? The Indian guy, right? He came to the class because he remembered that his father used to meditate, and he used to make fun of him. Right? And now Jay's in his 70s. He came to the class. He takes this very seriously now. Right? You know, he's paranoid about, the pandemic. That's why he isn't coming recently. But, whenever we have online meetings or everything, anytime like that, he's there. And I know he looks at the talks. So the bottom line here, the thing I keep trying to emphasize more than anything else about this class and about these teachings and practices, please be clear that this is not a luxury. This is not a hobby. The attitude you should have about this, if you understand what it is, this is a lifesaver. that you can save your life by practicing meditation. You can wake up and realize that you've been living in a very little world given by your conditioning. And you can come out of that and wake up and start realizing how exciting life is, you know, what an opportunity life is, how appreciative we should be about the opportunity to be here. We don't live our lives with an appreciation or awareness of that at all. Most of us are living our lives to get it over with, aren't we? That's a pretty goddamn sad statement, that most of us are living our life to get it over with. What's that? That's right.
Well, that is good then.
Waiting for retirement. So now I could sit around and really be scared about my death because I don't have anything to distract myself with anymore.
We're just waiting for the end of the week, just waiting for Friday.
That's right. Everything is set up to get it over with. You get the week over with, get the year over with, you know, get the career over with. That's insanity. That's insanity. Get this precious opportunity to experience a human life over with. I mean, you know, if somebody plays that back to you, you look at it like, I wasn't thinking of it that way. You weren't thinking of it anyway. You were just following the herd. So this is a wake-up call. Meditation is a wake-up call, and I hope that you understand that, and I hope that you understand that unless you practice this consistently the way it's meant to be done, it is not going to work. If you do practice consistency the way it's meant to be done, it will transform your life, and you will experience transcendence. You will experience an ability to be above all this insanity, and at the same time be participating in it without any fear or concern about that it's going to threaten you at all. Because as the Course in Miracles says, what's real cannot be threatened, and what's unreal doesn't exist. And when you see that to be true, and when you're living your life with that truth, life is a different life than when you're living life afraid. Okay, I case my rest.